Welcome to all our listeners and viewers of the Vision Business community. I have another friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, Roger Simpson, the retail guru. He actually runs a company called Retail Solutions. And Roger, welcome to our little podcast.
Thanks, George. Lovely to be here this morning.
Yeah, Roger, just explain to our viewers and listeners what you actually do and what you have been doing for a number of years.
Yeah, sure. So I've got the wonderful role of working in retail, which I love, and helping retailers to improve their customer service, increase their sales. And I do that primarily by actually working with a number of store managers, actually teaching them how do you coach people on the job. So that's an area that I find most managers really struggle with. How to set their team up to succeed. So set clear expectations, then how to follow up and give feedback. So just been doing it for just a short time, George, about 25 years. So
your babe.
Yes, that's right. Loving it.
No, I've seen your work firsthand, and you seem to work really well with multi-store chains, and
yes.
So you tend to work with large numbers of people in a room, and the results I've seen have been astounding. So maybe you could cite a couple of examples of what you've done.
Yeah, sure. So I've worked. I guess what I get a lot of satisfaction out of is working with clients who want to implement. And it's interesting, George, because I guess what I've my chosen career is working with people around their soft skills, and coaching's doesn't really come naturally to most of us. And I never knew about coaching until I learned a really, really good process, as I said, about over 25 years ago. And what I've seen with the retailers I work with is, in one in particular, which I'm very proud of, is the Beechworth Bakery group. So I started working with them back in 2000, and I've pretty much worked with them every year for the last 20 years. So, and I've helped them with training their managers. I've done frontline training with their staff around the service sales, the coaching, around recruitment. And I guess what's been really, really cool is that I worked with the Bendigo store manager just last year, and he was newish, and but certainly a really good guy, enthusiastic. And the thing I really like is that, as most store managers need to be, is they need to be focused on making their people successful. And
yes,
so we did a little training program with him, and immediately he could just see the results, and he could just see that his supervisors who actually work at the front line with their team, their supervisors had much more confidence around how to actually give feedback. And we saw a result in about in less than a week. He was up 8% on his average sale, and has managed to maintain that for last time I spoke to him, which was back in January. So like a really, really, really positive result. And so, as I said, that's what I really like, is working with clients who want to implement, and particularly when building long-term relationships is really cool. So, and I work with a number of store chains for excess of 10 years. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, Roger, most people would not know the history of the Beechworth Bakery, but it really came out of nowhere in a nowhere town.
Yes.
And now there are like bucket loads of trucks and buses that head down there with tourists, and it's a multi-million-dollar operation now.
Absolutely.
And it's fantastic. It started from a business that was broke, that Tim O'Toole took over, and of course you were instrumental in building up the credibility of the staff, and just explain some of the key benefits that staff receive by working at the Beechworth Bakery, because that in itself is quite unique in the retail space.
Yeah, and he is a very unique individual, Tom.
He is.
And having known him for 20 years, it hasn't changed that much, but he's just quite unique, and a fantastic Australian from nothing to making good. So was brought up in poverty, left school when he was 13, massive learning disabilities. And you would think, how can this guy ever succeed in business? And he actually owned the Beechworth Bakery in early days, and then sold it, and then went to WA for a while, but came back in probably his mid-30s or so, and bought it back again. And exactly as you said, it was in a place called Beechworth, which is 3 hours north of Melbourne, but at least half an hour off the main drag. And when he bought the business, it was doing probably $100,000 of turnover and 2 part-time staff. And Beechworth was struggling like a lot of country towns around Australia, where a lot of government businesses were actually up and moving.
Yep.
So they lost their big hospital there, and which was an employer of a lot of people. So that dragged a lot of people away from Beechworth. But Tom got in there, and just through having a focus on product, having a focus on service, and being a bit innovative as well, and because he used to, one of the things that he realised he needed to change was getting outside of his comfort zone, and that was with and he wasn't great at socialising with people, but he knew that he had to do that, so he had to network, and then they went overseas to visit various on bakery conferences, and I'd go and visit other stores and get ideas and come back and implement, and that just grew his business dramatically. So they grew it to over $3 million, and I'm actually not quite sure what that time period would be from the time he bought it, George, but look, it may be over a 10-year period, and then I was lucky to come along when the business was very successful, and just helped to build on that even more. And from that time, they've now opened another 8 bakeries. So using a very similar model. And the thing I really like it is that they are so focused on, one thing is it's really about their people. And Tom has been a big advocate of that, about finding the right people, training them, and then supporting them. And that's always been his thing. And he talks about, in hard times, one of the biggest costs, of course, to any business is their people, and it's easy to cut training because it's a bottom line cost, and you go, okay, well, we just can't afford to do training. And Tom always talks about, he said that's what made him successful in tough times. He's invested in his people, and he's provided training to his people, and that's what's kept them at the sharp end of having that great product and great service. And he knows as well, like he's quick to admit that they don't get it right all the time. I mean, as you know, George, very well, retail's tough. It's tough to get it right all the time, but they are just much more consistent than most other retailers, and that's been their success.
Yes, it's quite counterintuitive. In tough times, businesses, I mean, corporate execs, the first thing they do is cut back on training. They think that there's no direct correlation between training and top line growth. Which is absolutely insane. But it's a bit of a mind stretch for a lot of people to understand there is still a connection, and now that we're in tough times, best time to start investing in people, because
absolutely. Well, your people in retail in particular, and with a lot of other businesses, it's about people. And what I talk about when I run training is that and when I'm training team leaders and store managers, etc., is you cannot run your store on your own. It's impossible. And so you need people, but not only do you need them to be there, you want them to be turning up on time, you want them to be motivated, focus on the customer. And that, as we know, it doesn't always happen, because retail, it's a repetitive job. You do the same thing pretty much every day, every time you're working in a store. So to keep people motivated is quite challenging. So, but it's also about finding the right people in the first place, George. And what I see in retail now, which frustrates me immensely, is that we've really dropped our standards with the people that we're recruiting. And most retailers say to me, it's hard to find good people, and it's not easy. I know it's not easy. However, if you lower your bar and you allow people in that shouldn't be working in retail, then they're not trainable, they're not coachable. So your service is just going to be a reflection of that, which is going to be poor, impacts your bottom line. Not immediately, but certainly mid and long term.
It makes so much perfect sense, and it's quite logical. But it makes me wonder why the likes of Myers and David Jones haven't employed you, Roger. Because good old fashioned service and just being good at the little things has always worked ever since time immemorial. It's
Yeah,
always worked. But
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about lowering the bar. A lot of businesses have done that. Major brands that we know of have done that,
yes,
and they're suffering as a result. And speaking of suffering, let's talk about COVID-19 and
yeah,
how that's impacted, well, your business or
yeah,
your clientele. What's your view?
yeah. Look, certainly retail would be one of the biggest that's been affected,
Yeah.
and because obviously we've seen massive store closures, and particularly
Yep.
a number of the big brands have chosen to close all their stores.
Yep.
And one of my clients I work with is the Just Group, so that's Just Jeans, JJ,
Yeah.
Smiggle,
Yeah.
Peter Alexander, etc. And they took the decision back in April to close all their 1,100 stores, George.
Wow.
So
Wow.
10,000 people have been stood down. So and that's not uncommon. With even Myer actually closed their stores, and so retail has been certainly hit dramatically, and it's been interesting, because obviously it was around making sure that your people were safe, and you could argue, of course, that buying pajamas or buying pens from Smiggle, or buying some pants or a top or whatever is not essential.
Mm.
So you don't need to go out. So that's why, and I think it's based on what we're seeing with flattening the curve, it certainly seems to be the right decision with
Yep.
keeping people away, social distancing, etc. So
Yep.
so they've had a real hit, and what's happened, of course, is that we've actually, because I'm a bricks and mortar guy, George.
Yep.
That's my stock and trade, and there's been talk prior to COVID about the growth of online, and of course everyone talked about when Amazon was arriving in Australia. Oh, it's the death of retail. There'll be no more stores left, and we'll all be buying online. And it's been interesting because the uptake on Amazon was really slow, and still prior to COVID, online sales had sort of crept up to only about 10%. So 90% of retail sales was still done in physical stores. Now, online was growing at a higher percentage every year because it offers a much smaller base. And last year we saw it was a pretty tough year for bricks and mortar retailers. Growth only around about 2%, so just above inflation. So very, very challenging. And then we kick off the year, we have bushfires, and then straight into COVID. So it's been a double whammy. And what it's done, of course, is that it's actually driven a lot of people to purchase online.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, because one of the things that was very low in online sales was grocery, because I'll just pop down the shops. Now, people were isolating at home, which is fantastic, and went, okay, well, I need to get some groceries, so I'll do it online. So, and obviously with clothing, all sorts of different things, although the demand has been down, of course, because a lot of people are working from home.
Yep.
And apparently sales of items above the waist have been quite strong, George. Below the waist items have been slow. So, because we're all on Zoom.
I'm actually.
Yeah,
are you pointing to me?
No, George. Not no reference there. No reference there at all. So, so of course, what's happened is that it's given a free run for online for people to get used to purchasing online.
Yeah.
So
it has.
So what's interesting, and of course, as they say, 21 days to create a habit, or whatever the number is. But it's actually we've seen people that have actually been at home for some weeks now, so and purchasing online, getting used to it, etc. And so what I will see when whatever you call normal happens again is that 10% is going to have a quite a big increase.
I would have to agree. It's interesting how the online businesses got a shot in the arm. I mean, Amazon was talking about even closing its distribution center because sales were stalling. They expected the kind of growth they had in the States, and it just wasn't happening. But now it's happy days.
Yes, that's right.
Very interesting, and of course that comes at a cost to bricks and mortar retail.
Absolutely, and I've been saying for some time that because you could see what was happening it's almost the perfect storm. And this is prior to COVID, George. So you can't blame any outside influences.
Yeah.
Is that for example, Myer, of course, did as we know, 5-6 years ago, pretty much took most of their people off the floor.
Yeah.
And which resulted in customers going in and having to self-select in Myer their own clothing, etc. And it's not really a self-select model. It's not set up like that. So a lot of customers would get frustrated and go, I'll just go elsewhere. So there's been that background. As I said, we've been dropping, we've been lowering the bar with the quality of people, not investing in our people, not training them enough, etc. So it's the perfect storm for customers to go into a retail store, get frustrated, get average service at best, and then go, I'll just go online. So there's, to me, online is, and prior to COVID, was going to be here to stay. It absolutely has to, because it's convenient. People can I say to retailers is that customers want to shop when they want to shop, how they want to shop, and that could be on their mobile, that could be via Instagram posts they've just read or whatever, and they want to click and actually go to purchase or whatever. So retailers have got to get in the game and go, that's what my shoppers are doing. Not, we don't offer that service because your competitor will be.
Yeah.
And I've heard a number of retail staff go, it's really frustrating when we're talking to a customer and they get on their phone and actually check a price at another store. Well, guess what? That's reality.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that your service is at a level where, and you may not be the cheapest, but they're actually going to go, you know what? I'm going to buy it from here because this person's been great. The price is pretty similar, but talk me through the best option for me, etc. So this is where service has to come to the fore, and then moving through to what's happening with coming out of COVID, George, when stores are reopening. Why would a customer want to come in if the level of service was what it's like pre-COVID? I'll just go online. Yeah. So, and as I said, retailers have got to adopt technology. If someone, and I think the figure I heard is close to 90% of customers that now do research online. So either in a store, prior to a store visit, etc. So whatever your online website, etc., it has to actually be really easy to look at. If I want to actually have an inquiry, I want to find out whether you've got the product in store without having to go to a store. Yeah. And then find out it's not there. Yeah. Man, so frustrating. So the technology's there, and retailers have to invest. Click and collect has I know with Bunnings there has been a dramatic increase for them, and so retailers have you've got to do this stuff. You've got to set your store up now that it actually, so that the technology, the way of purchase is aligns with your store.
Yeah. I mean, traditionally, the food and beverage industry and retail has been very slow to change. People have been stuck in habits. They tend to think that there's a tendency for all humans to think because it worked yesterday, it's going to work today.
That's right. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There are going to be some real pressures for businesses to perform. Otherwise, they'll be out of action. And speaking of out of action, what kind of percentages do you think of businesses pre-COVID will be out of action post-COVID?
Yeah, look, it's going to be very interesting actually, and I think as I was saying before, because last year was such a tough year, and the last 3 or 4 years we've been losing a number of retailers. 10, 20, 30 retailers a year have, and some smaller ones, but also some bigger change as well. start of this year, I couldn't believe that Kiki K went into administration. So, because to me, that was a very well-run business. It had a great products that were on trend. I think it was more their overseas. They were starting to open stores overseas that may not have gone too well for them. But
yes.
So on that backdrop, George, man, it's a real challenge because retailers were hurting already. Christmas wasn't that great, and that's what a lot of retailers rely on.
Yeah.
So, and as I said before, we had bushfires and then straight into COVID. It's going to be interesting, George. I think there's going to be a number, and I don't know what that number is going to be, but it's probably going to be, it might be 20% of retailers may not be able to. Well, they may reopen, hoping that they can, that the influx of customers will come straight back up, but that's not going to happen. And they're going to have stock that they've got that is now, because you've missed 2 months, so you've got stock that's that you can't sell. So we're going to have to mark down. And of course, as when you dig into your margin and you're on sale, it's a slippery slide, George. So yeah, I think we're going to see a number of retailers, and what it'll do, because Myer and David Jones struggling and have been for some years, and what I think is going to happen now, it'll just push it a lot faster.
Yeah,
they're going to have to cut down their store footprints. They just can't have the massive big stores now because it's just not warranted. And Big W were already doing that. They were heading down that path, and it'll also mean that it'll bring to a head the Target Kmart amalgamation. And I wouldn't be surprised if a number of if Target's actually is completely shut down and changes to Kmart.
Yes, look, unfortunately, through any crisis, there's always a percentage of attrition amongst businesses.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, because we're not terribly young, we're old enough to remember previous crises. Generally speaking, the businesses that survive the exit the tunnel at the other end, they tend to pick up more business, and they're a little bit stronger because they've been forced to become smarter. Those ones, as you said, that refuse to change and want to go back to the way things were, they might be faced with some challenges.
I read a really good article, and it was about what's going to happen in the States. And it makes good sense, and the correlations is the same here. Is that larger retailers like chain stores, etc., have got deeper pockets because they've generally got some cash that they've kept aside, etc. The smaller retailers, the mums and dads, etc., have got virtually no cash, and it's 3 weeks of no trade, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. There's got to be the negotiation with landlords, which the government's stepped in to try and help that as well. But that's always been an issue in the last few years as well about with rents. So what I can see, and you'll see this in restaurants as well, George. What you'll see is a lot of the individual chains of restaurants will actually just won't be able to reopen because, as you know, George, what's happening as well is that this has been a major impact on shopping behaviour.
Yes.
And not only online, but where we actually go now. And I was in mid-March. I was doing finally doing my Cert 4 in training and assessment, George. After all these years. And
I hope you got some recognition for prior learning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So we were actually going. I was travelling to the city each day in Melbourne, and you just see this is in mid-March before the work from home really started to kick in, and you just see the city starting to empty out, and of course so many coffee shops, etc., and food outlets are relying so heavily on those customers. So, and now we have work from home, so. What's going to happen when things reopen? A lot of people are still going to stay at home.
It's a It's a strange thing about human nature that we tend to just repeat patterns that work. So during good times, most of the retail population don't actually change. They just do the same old doing.
Yeah,
It takes people like yourself to push retailers to be innovative and thinking outside the square, even during good times. But certainly when we hit a wall like
yeah,
COVID-19, it certainly brings on the need to pivot and change
yes,
and
yes,
and innovate. What
yeah,
kind of what kind of things have you seen?
yeah. I think for me is that retailers that have actually, and this is why they needed to be all across, and I call it the omni-channel, so that you've got your online presence,
Mm,
and then you've got your physical bricks and mortar.
mm,
Those retailers that invested heavily in those platforms are the ones that are actually going to do really well, because they've simply moved their customers from the physical stores to the online area,
mm-hmm.
and then they'll now want to move them back into the physical stores. Pretty seamless, no big deal. The ones that haven't had an online presence, or it's clunky, or as I said before, is that I can't check, whether what stock you have, or it's difficult to find out those things. They sort of have click and collect, but not really, or what it's any barriers now, George. And that's what we see with innovative retailers, that they just focus on what are the pain points for customers, how do I eliminate those?
Mm.
That's how you make a successful business. And you only have to look at Uber for the master stroke of what they did, and about absolutely putting it to the taxi industry. So,
Yeah.
so there's a few retailers are doing really well. Bunnings has been they just continue to do well with what they've got. And interesting that their online presence only really started to come on pretty much at the
It
end of
did.
last year. So
Yeah.
so their time was pretty amazing. And then also you've got the likes of JB Hi-Fi that continue to do well. So yeah, we've got some good retailers here. We have.
Roger, before we finish up, what can you share with some of our listeners and viewers? What kind of wise words of wisdom can you impart?
I'll do my best, George. Well, from my point of view, where I always come from, it's about your people. And that's why I've loved working so much with the Beechworth Bakery group for so long, because they just believe in their people and they invest in them. And
Yeah.
to me, it's about, because every business is only successful because of the people inside that business. So what I'd say to anyone is that we've just got to be better at actually recruiting the right people,
Yeah.
and identifying, what exactly, when we have great people, what makes them great? What are the attributes? What are the personalities, etc.? What are their skills and knowledge? And we want to replicate that. So we want to find people that can actually do similar things. But what I know over all these years, George, is it's all about attitude.
Yeah.
And you hire people with the right attitude, and you can create them and help them be amazing. So one thing is about recruiting the right people. Then you've got to train them. You've got to induct them and train them well, because how can they perform if they don't know what your expectations are, or they don't know how to do the job properly? So training is a key one. But then the other area that I'm absolutely passionate about, of course, is follow-up. Is that you can't just train someone or go through an induction process, whether it be 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or as it probably should be 3 months or 6 months, George, and then expect them to maintain that level without any follow-up. So that's where when I discovered coaching, and about how it supports people to do a really good job, with the focus on catching people doing it right, George, not the old-fashioned, let's catch them doing it wrong. So, and we just need to up the level of feedback we provide people. And we've got the younger generation coming through, George, as they are really putting it to leaders in a way that we want feedback.
Yeah.
Tell us how we're going. Not once a year in a staff appraisal. We need to know. And some, some are a little bit too demanding where they want it every day, but that's okay. You can deal with that. But most people will get zero feedback. They don't. And the old saying is, well, if you're doing a bad job, I'll tell you. Otherwise, you're doing great. Well, it just doesn't work anymore. So
no.
Yeah. So it's really investing so much in your people, but to me, it's about investing so much more in your middle level managers. The one like store managers for me, the correlation is so powerful, George, and I'm sure you've probably seen it with all your experience.
Yeah.
Is that great store managers have great people and they have great stores, but it's because they're really, really good at developing and motivating their people.
Thank you, Roger. Look, in my mind, you're not just a retail expert. You're a people expert because you work on the quality of people and staffing that companies have. So you do go well beyond just the retail sector, because at the end of the day, every business is based on people-to-people interactions.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And you have a lot of value that you can add to any company, not just those in retailing.
Thanks, George.
How do people find you, Roger?
Yeah, no worries. Well, the easiest way, of course, George, is go to my website, which of course is theretailsolution.com.au. Mm-hmm. And I've got a whole lot of resources on there as well, which are free. There's some training videos on there. I'm as you know, George, I'm a regular blogger.
Yep.
So I've got probably about 5 years of various blogs on there as well. So for people to have a look at. So and I've also got a free book offer as well, George. So anyone goes to my website and then just scrolls down below the fold, you'll see there's I have a free, it's a physical book as well, George. I'll actually post it out to you, and that's called The Ultimate Retail Sales Experience. But as you said, it is retail focused, but it's actually about people. And you're right, it's not just about retail. So you're absolutely right.
You have a lot you can contribute, Roger. So thank you very much for making the time available for this interview. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure anyone listening or viewing you on this interview would say the same.
Absolute pleasure, George. Thanks for your time as well.
Thank you, Roger. You take care.
You too, mate. Cheers.
Bye-bye.